Susan had a very real fear against fire, and it started when she went out for a few groceries a year ago and left her washing machine on. She never even thought that it could catch on fire. When she came back from doing her groceries, she was shocked to the core when she saw that her house was on fire, and the fire was so bad she had to use her insurance money to buy another house. She promised herself that she would never ever leave on any appliance ever again overnight when she left her house, or when she wasn't looking at it to see was everything okay. She plugged out the TV, radio, washing machine and dryer. She switched the oven off. She didn't smoke, so didn't have that worry at least. All Susan's life, she felt tiny feelings that afterwards explained themselves. For instance, she once was on her way to school when she was 8, and she felt a strange dizziness. She didn't tell anyone, but that day in school, her friends spun her around, fooling, and when she finally stood on her own, she felt dizzy. Before the fire had happened in her house, Susan had felt very hot. She never even guessed it was because there would have been a fire about to engulf her whole home. It was one night Susan felt a strange feeling. She felt hot, but also felt cold. Most people would say it was just a fever, and she hoped that that was all it was, a simple fever. She made sure to plug out the appliances, TV, washing machine, etc., as always. She lay in bed worried. Was her feverish hot and cold feeling a warning that there will be another fire in her house? She eventually fell asleep. She was dreaming about a fire brigade, and there was a fire alarm blending in with the siren until she realized she was awake and her fire alarm was ringing. She panicked and jumped out of bed, and when she opened her door, smoke spread all around her fast. She rushed downstairs and wondered how anything could have went on fire. When she plugged out everything, she froze in fright when she saw her fridge had caught on fire, and knew now that was the one appliance she couldn't plug out, because how could she? No one would. She rang the fire brigade, and thankfully they arrived and put the fire out before it did any real damage. But her biggest fear was, what would she do about the fridge, and how could she turn it off without spoiling her food? She would never be able to sleep easy knowing her fridge was plugged in. That was the one appliance she never, ever guessed would be the one she had to plug out. Thanks for watching The Assassin Rapper, and if you want to stay up to date on new content, then please subscribe and be sure to hit the bell to be notified on new content. The bullies were staring at him in awe as he seemed to grow into a giant. Aiden was frightened with what was happening and couldn't explain it, but the fear of what was happening was nothing compared to the satisfaction he had on his face when he saw them in fear. His wish must have came true, as he now was like a giant to them. He was like a giant to anyone. He towered over them and was kicking up his leg back and forth, frightening them. They seemed to be stuck to the spot in fear because they didn't run. Suddenly, Aiden lifted his foot over them and was getting ready to crush them like flies. Aiden was just after his breakfast, getting ready to go to school, and his mom and dad were speaking to each other. Little did they know that Aiden was being bullied from months and months in school. Aiden didn't tell his mom and dad, but just hoped the bullying would stop. That morning he stood outside the school, wondering would he not go in at all, but he knew if he didn't, he would get into trouble with his parents and the school. He knew that his parents would be informed he hadn't attended school. Inside the school, the same teasing happened. He wished he was bigger and stronger so he could crush those bullies so they could never ever bully him again. The next morning when he got off the bus, he hid behind a bush to try to compose himself before going into the school. He felt like crying, but suddenly it was like he was moving up in the sky. There were gasps behind him. The bullies were staring at him in awe as he seemed to grow into a giant. Aiden was frightened with what was happening and couldn't explain it, but the fear of what was happening was nothing compared to the satisfaction he had on his face when he saw them in fear. His wish must have came true, as he now was like a giant to them. He was like a giant to anyone. He towered over them and was kicking up his leg back and forth, frightening them. They seemed to be stuck to the spot in fear because they didn't run. Suddenly, Aiden lifted his foot over them and was getting ready to crush them like flies, until he realized he wasn't a bully, so he just walked away. Thanks for watching The Assassin Rapper, and if you want to stay up to date on new content, then please subscribe and be sure to hit the bell to be notified on new content. Sarah was looking forward to watch a movie called The Last Night on Earth that she was lent by her sister. It seemed to be a great horror movie, which Sarah loved. Any horror movie was her type of movie. She loved the suspense and the thrill of what could happen next. Sarah's best friend Louise was calling over to watch the movie in about 30 minutes. Sarah decided to have a quick shower, so she left a note on the dining room table saying she was in the shower and won't be long. When Sarah was in the shower, she was humming to her favourite Guns N' Roses song, Paradise City. She had a habit of singing or humming in the shower. A few minutes later, there was a knock on the shower door. Sarah shouted, "Hi Louise, thanks for letting me know you're there. I'll be down in 2 minutes." When Sarah was out of the shower, she heard a car pull up in her drive. She was shocked when she looked out the window, realizing Louise had just pulled into her driveway. It hit her suddenly. If Louise was just after pulling into her driveway, then who had just knocked at the shower door? A cold shiver ran up her spine, and suddenly a figure dressed in black stood in front of her and said, "I hope you enjoyed your last night on Earth," and shot her dead. Thanks for watching The Assassin Rapper, and if you want to stay up to date on new content, then please subscribe and be sure to hit the bell to be notified on new content. Dave was walking through the woods at 10 p.m. when he thought he heard a noise in the bushes. He looked around and saw no one, but he sensed there was someone watching him. He never walked into the woods more than a mile because everyone that knew the woods knew that it could take hours, if not days, to find your way out the further you went in. It was like a maze after a while. He continued to walk on when suddenly 2 people in black jumped out of the bushes in front of him and held a gun to his head. They said, "Don't move and you won't get hurt. Me and my friend here have a little game we like to play. It's called The Hunt. You, my friend, will be human prey. We are going to give you a head start of 10 minutes. And me and my friend here are going to hunt you down. And if we find you before midnight, then we will shoot you, of course, and you will be dead. But just for the slightest chance of you surviving past midnight or escaping these woods, then you are free to go. Even if we spot you after midnight, you will be free to go. You will have your freedom." Dave was shocked at what the man just said and was about to walk back from the woods so he could leave, but the man said, "Do you think we are stupid? You are not allowed to go that way. You're only meant to go deep into the woods, and don't think about coming back. We have dozens of more people on the lookout in case you decide to leave the easy way. But don't worry, it's just me and Bert here who will be hunting you down when you go that way deep into the woods. You ready to go, boy?" Dave said, "I'll go, but please don't kill me," and Dave ran and ran. 10 minutes later, the men followed him. Dave luckily knew of a great hiding spot that hardly no one knew except himself and his son, who unfortunately was murdered just a few weeks ago. Dave hid in a small little cave that was hidden by trees that he hoped the men didn't know of. Luckily, Dave spent most of the time there, and when he got out at 2 minutes to midnight, he exited the cave to be greeted by the 2 men holding the guns right to him. One man said, "Hey there, boy, did you really think we would be stupid enough to not know about that little cave there? And do you know there is still 2 minutes left? That is plenty time for us to shoot and kill you. And guess what? That is exactly what we are going to do." Dave lifted a rock, blocking his face as the men shot him several times in the chest. Dave fell down. The men walked over to watch him die. They looked down and said, "You were such an easy prey." Dave smiled up at them. The men wondered why he was smiling after being shot several times. One man asked, "What's so funny?" Dave said, "Ever hear of bulletproof vests?" Then he pulled a rope and a trap fell over the 2 men. Then Dave said, "That boy you hunted down and killed a few weeks ago was my son, and I could have killed ye back then, but I wanted to hunt ye bastards when ye were hunting your prey, which unluckily for ye was me." Within seconds, Dave turned into a werewolf at midnight, which he knew he always did every single night there was a full moon, and he chose tonight to be the night he would wander down the road knowing that they would try their luck at finding prey. He prayed that they would be looking for prey tonight. As he turned into a werewolf, he released the trap and bit their leg, hand and arm off, watching them squirm in pain. Then he said, "I was your prey, but now let me pray for ye. Now I lay ye down to sleep. I pray to the devil your soul to keep. When ye should die in this place of doom, I pray the devil keeps ye a very hot room." And then, within seconds, they were dead.